Welcome back to this week's episode of the MovieBabble Podcast. This week, you've got myself and Brennan. We're going to talk about a very minor blip in the box office this weekend, as well as some of the Netflix top 10 movies and what we've been watching, as well as the long-awaited return to the theater. Remember, as always, you can check us out online at MovieBabble.com. That is just MovieBabble now. And other than that, let's jump into it. So the biggest news coming out of the box office is Becky, which is basically Kevin James's Uncut Gems, from what I understand, just not as good. And it pulled in a whopping $178,000 worldwide in a 42 theater run over the weekend. So it's mainly in drive-in theaters. I think exclusively was in drive-in theaters, and then some video on demand numbers from that, but those won't really play into its box office performance just because of the way everything is calculated. So at least things are starting to return. I know next week we'll see Sal, which was supposed to be a release in August, I believe. That's now a Disney Plus release, and we'll see The King of Staten Island. So we're getting some momentum going with bigger movies coming out now.
Yeah, and you know what? Becky's quite a funny story, this Kevin James movie. I remember seeing still images from it and kind of just hearing about what it was about. It's kind of interesting to see him take on this role, but I mean, I don't know if I could take him seriously. But I'd be very down to watch this movie if there was any way I could. But yeah, as you said, 170 grand worldwide. I think it put up $147,000 in North America this weekend, pretty much, as you said, exclusively in drive-in theaters. So that is pretty good. I mean, we're starting to see numbers, and the drive-in theaters are making quite a splash this year. This is probably going to be one of their better years in a while, which is, I guess, a odd upside for that aspect of the entertainment industry. But Becky, I mean, Kevin James, this is great.
Yeah, I know it's weirdly working out pretty favorably for the drive-in theater in my city because it actually closed down permanently about a year and a half ago, and then somebody bought it, and they've had a successful summer so far because it's the only place you can really see movies right now. So I think a lot of the country is seeing that. I don't really know if drive-in theaters are kind of a worldwide thing. I would assume probably not anymore. But I know at least domestically they've been making quite a comeback.
Yeah, where I live out here, a little outside the Toronto area, is we're seeing drive-in theaters now. They got approved, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago, and now a lot of them are opening up. Just this past weekend, actually, a lot of them opened up, and they're kind of starting to roll out movies. I think I checked a couple of the drive-in theaters, and a couple of them were playing classics, and a few of them had Invisible Man and Trolls. So you have a little bit of an array of movies that are already out or were already out before the pandemic, or then Trolls, which was kind of that big VOD release in March, I believe. Sorry, in April, I think, yeah, for Trolls. But I mean, for the most part, I think drive-in theaters, I don't know if they're a worldwide thing. I feel like they're a very Americanized thing that made its way up to Canada, like many other American commodities. But I know that here they're definitely, now since they've been approved to reopen after or throughout the coronavirus year, they're starting to make a pretty good comeback here in Canada as well.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I'd hope that they continue to kind of have that throughout the summer. But I think as we get really closer to that magic July date for Tenet, they're not going to have as much success just because people are going to have more options. But it's looking pretty likely like Tenet is going to firmly stick to July and not get moved back to August and bump Wonder Woman to December. Everybody seems pretty confident that we'll have the 90% of theaters open so that Tenet can have basically the same financial size of release that it would have had, if COVID had never happened. So it's looking pretty hopeful.
Yeah, so we had some news about this come out just this past week. So obviously, Tenet, their main goal is to have 80% of theaters open worldwide for them to actually release. Now, the thing about that, they also specify that they want big markets to be open. They want to see London area open, Los Angeles area open, and New York area open. But this past week, we have kind of reports coming out from the National Association of Theater Owners, sorry, in the United States. They do believe that 90% of global theaters will be open by July 17. So, as I said, Tenet wanted 80% to be open. They believe 90% will be open by July 17. Very interesting kind of statement there. I'm kind of skeptical, honestly. I mean, if they're saying that, then that's a good sign. I know that in the United States, there's kind of a quicker push to get reopened now here in June. But I feel like where I'm at, and especially just the surrounding area where I'm in, they're going to be very cautious. Like still currently where I live, despite the cases kind of plateauing and slowly declining, where I live, you still can only have gatherings of up to 5 people. That's getting moved to 10 next week. So for me, I doubt we'll see my mainstream theaters be open by July 17. I just like it could happen, but it just seems so quick. Like that's just 5 weeks away, little over. But I mean, I guess yeah, there are other countries that have really pushed through the coronavirus. They're over the hump, and there are countries that are now being aggressive with the reopening. So 90% could be, it could be like theoretical. It could definitely happen. But I mean, I'm still gonna stay skeptical on this, but we'll see.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at. I think some of the larger chains are really going to wait until they can open everywhere, which means that, hot spots like New York and Los Angeles are going to kind of dictate domestically when everything else is going to open up. And so we're just kind of seeing everybody waiting, and, they really don't have any movies that are going to be big and drawing in crowds right now. So the theaters have to consider whether it's going to be more expensive to open up than it'll be just to not open until Tenet's here. And if not, like AMC said, they've, doubted whether or not they could make it all the way through to um, through the summer without opening up. And so it's really just kind of anybody's guess. Tenet's going to kind of dictate it, and if not, Warner Brothers will bring us all together with Wonder Woman the following month. So
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, it will be interesting. I mean, we're going to keep an eye on this. I think this is something that's going to be developing pretty quickly over the next few weeks because you're really going to start to see if theaters can get open for that July 17th date. But it would be awesome to see theaters get open there and Tenet to come out and really be a rousing kind of hit. I do feel like people want to get out and go to the movies. I think that there's kind of like a false sort of narrative that people are going to be like that the vast majority of people are going to be a little too nervous to go back in public with other people, but I doubt that. I don't think that is something that is sticks like through the majority of people. I'm sure there are going to be small groups of people here or there that will be cautious. But I 100% doubt that the vast majority of people are nervous. I think people want to get out again. They want to do things again. And it's just kind of a waiting game, but we'll see.
yeah, yeah, that's pretty much it. And I mean, we're all hoping. It's been 3 months. If you're in China, it's been even longer than that. That everybody's just been waiting to get back into the theater and just to watch something new. And I know that theaters are trying their best to meet it, but this isn't always something that's easy to control. But Netflix has been somewhat picking up the slack. I mean, they've at least been releasing movies. Whether or not they're actually movies you'd want to go see or you would pay to see if they were in theaters is debatable, but they're at least there. So this week's top 10 was pretty historic because this is, I think, the first time since we've been counting the Netflix top 10 that an Illumination movie, particularly Despicable Me or The Grinch from a couple years ago, has not been in the top 10. And I'm just breathing a sigh of relief. Just feeling with all those parents out there who've had to watch The Grinch 20 times over the past 3 months and who just needed a break. So, really, this podcast is for them.
Yeah, pouring out for them. But just yeah, Despicable Me and The Grinch. I mean, they were hanging in for a long time. Despicable Me is one that I think I could watch a couple times, but The Grinch, I mean, I think the one time I saw it in theaters was probably enough. I didn't hate the movie. I just thought it was fine. But I mean, watching it time and time again, I don't know about that. But this week's top 10 is a little, I'd say a little bit more low profile than past weeks. I don't think there are as many um, super popular films on there. I mean, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, so it's a, kind of a handful. There's some older movies that have kind of resurged, and then there's a pretty solid lineup. Well, I say solid. There's a pretty substantial lineup of new movies that are Netflix originals. So we had The Last Days of American Crime is in the number one spot, and 360 DNI is in the number two spot, followed by Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs at number three, The Help up to number four, The Healer at number five, Clueless at number six, which I believe that's in a recent addition to the platform. Uncut Gems still hanging into the top 10 at number seven, Twister at number eight, The Night Clerk at number nine, and Nick's favorite, The Wrong Missy at number 10. So I mean, you do have, and kind of like always, you do have most of the movies are Netflix originals that are going to be in the top 10. So you have The Wrong Missy that's, here from a couple weeks ago, The Night Clerk, and then you're talking about the top two as well, The Last Days of American Crime and 360 DNI, or 365 DNI, which are all Netflix movies. So I'm not surprised to see them at the top. I'm glad Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is up there. That movie kind of brought Lord and Miller into the spotlight, and I don't think we can be thankful enough for that.
That's a good movie. I will stand by that. I think that's a really fun movie. That's a really good one. It's a good movie to pop on. I don't really remember the second one that well. I don't know if they were attached to it even. Maybe just in a producing way. I don't know what they did with the second film, but that first movie is quite enjoyable.
Yeah, and it's got good meme content. I think 10, 15 years from now, this will be that generation Shrek. I think it's up there. Like it's got good, like that meme of Terry Crews running, or not Terry Crews. I just popped into Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Mr. T's character running in that movie. I see that GIF a lot. But yeah, I think like a lot of people that kind of grew up with it have a really big fondness for it.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think did it come out in 2009, I believe, or around there, maybe 2011. But yeah, this is a fun movie. I don't know. I just love when all the food comes raining down in the end, and I even think there's some good meme content with the chickens that absorb that one dude late in the movie. I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about.
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad to see that getting a little more hype on Netflix. I do want to talk about The Help, just because that movie's been both relevant and not very relevant with everything going on right now. So with all the protests and the rioting and just everything that's going on in the U.S., as a lot of people are finally kind of waking up and hoping to address systemic racism and make some substantial strides forward towards equality in the country. There's obviously been a push in the past week or so to watch more films that are directed by Black actors or by Black directors or feature Black actors or tell Black stories or however you want to look at it, just so that they're working more towards diversity of movies. And there's been a lot of pushback against this movie in particular, because kind of like we like to shit on Green Book a lot, but this movie is very similar to Green Book in the fact that it features a white savior. The main character in this movie is Emma Stone, a white actress, in case you didn't know that, who is telling these Black characters' stories for them and is kind of the hero who pulls them all out of it, which obviously is going to feature a lot of pushback when we're kind of at a time where we're saying, hey, no, we need to focus on these Black characters and their experience and their triumphs rather than having them be the sidekick or the guy who gets helped in the end. And so I just find it interesting that this movie is up there, because it's probably a lot of people who are like, oh, maybe I should get more involved on learning the history of civil rights, because that's kind of a big focus of this movie, but are just kind of misguided in that. And I mean, this is accessible on Netflix, and so I think that's why a lot of people are gravitating towards it instead of something that's a little bit more socially relevant.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, I can't say too much to the movie because I even after all these years, I haven't watched it myself. But just kind of talking about getting more socially aware and stuff like that. I know that even in Canada there have been protests as well, not to the levels that we're seeing obviously in the States, but up here in Canada there have been many different protests in a lot of the major cities across the country, and even the world. I think at least a dozen countries have seen protesting kind of surrounding these issues. Um, but up here, I know there are a lot of movie sites. I know there's a local theater that has a um, kind of their own online shop, so you can rent movies online, like through the theater's name, and just watch them at home. I know something they did. They've made up to 25 films that kind of, as you said, tell black stories, directed by black directors, kind of star predominantly black cast. They've made up to I think 25 movies free for the month of June, and it's not like no name movies. Like there are some really good ones off the top of my head, if I'm remembering. I know Do the Right Thing, Malcolm X. Those are two that they had in there. Black Klansman is in there. I know Just Mercy, which is a lot more recent. Get Out is another one that was in there. Yeah, I'm trying to think, but there are definitely a couple dozen, and I think that's a really nice thing that they did. And there's a lot of just really good movies from recently years back. I know Steven Spielberg's The Color Purple is another one that's in there. But yeah, I think that's a really good way to go about it. But yeah, The Help it's an interesting choice, especially the way you framed that there with that white savior complex, and especially just thinking about Green Book a couple years ago. I like you think if The Help came out potentially a couple years ago, would it have the same reaction that Green Book had? Because The Help was almost a decade ago now, and was definitely loved when it came out. I would say. I don't know. Maybe we've changed.
Yeah, and I think part of the issue with Green Book is, it was up against movies, and in, years before it, years right after it, you've had a lot of movies that depicted the black experience more authentically and that actually had, a black voice in the lead rather than, as a secondary character or the character that gets saved in the end. And I think that's a lot of the pushback on Green Book is because, you had kind of the biggest one culturally of the past few years is going to be Get Out, and then you have Black Klansman was up that next year, the same year that Green Book was up, and so I think that's a lot of it. Whereas The Help came out when you really didn't have anything big to that degree, kind of telling that same story that I can recall at least.
That's a good way to frame it. I think that's definitely a great way to frame it, especially just kind of what things go up against. Sorry, I know. Also that year with Green Book, also Black Panther was another major one. And even a movie that didn't get nominated for Best Picture, but was definitely kind of pasted all over the Oscars. It got up to 4 nominations, I believe. Was If Beale Street Could Talk as well. Um, which for me is personally the best out of everything we just mentioned in the last few minutes. But yeah, you're right. I think it's definitely due to what it went up against. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting kind of retrospect.
Yeah, and so I think it's more one of those things where it just hasn't aged well because everybody's a little bit more exposed to the right way to do a movie like this. And then when you go back, you really see the faults. Because Nick and I talked about this a few weeks ago. I guess it would be like a month or two ago now. Time again doesn't make sense anymore. But he and I had both watched Guess Who's Coming to Dinner for the first time, and just seeing how poorly that movie has aged in a lot of ways. When even at the time it was pretty groundbreaking. And I'm not saying The Help was ever really that groundbreaking, but I think just moving forward and seeing the flaws of even 10 years ago just puts it in a new light.
Yeah, no, that's definitely it. And it is interesting to look at movies, um, looking back on movies and see how they've aged. I think that's a pretty important thing to do, and it's kind of a great thing about movies. They age with you as well. They're not always just the same thing you watched from the first time you watched it. Decades down, you can look back and grow more fond of a film, kind of see the issues with a film, enjoy a movie more. Like it's a very great relationship.
Yeah, so who knows? Maybe in 10 years we'll feel different about a lot of movies. Maybe in 10 years everyone's gonna hate Endgame and love Joker. Who knows? um, but the Netflix top 10 was actually still pretty solid this week. Clueless is in at number 6. That's a movie that I've never seen, but there's just so many references to it. It just I think this was one of the first big meme movies in kind of the early days of the internet. Um, I mean, like everybody knows if you say the words "as if," everybody immediately thinks about this movie. And it's one I've actually never seen yet, so I'm gonna try and get to that either tonight or tomorrow, which should be fun. Our fan favorite Uncut Gems still in at number 7, and then Twister is another movie that I've just never gotten around to, but there's just a lot of hype around it, so I'll probably check it out at some point.
Yeah, Twister, something that my teacher used to love playing during natural disasters class back in high school, and um, in geography as well. Like he just liked playing that movie. I think that's the only time I've watched it. It's enjoyable. I mean, it's a good time, but it's also kind of one of those iconic movies. Even if it's not the greatest movie out there, it's definitely has kind of a great nostalgic feel to it, especially if you're in the United States. And I know that where you live, I think you're probably pretty close to Tornado Alley.
Oh yeah, I'm like dead center in Tornado Alley, so I'm pretty sure this is the most popular movie that takes place in my state, next to The Wizard of Oz, because I'm pretty sure this is a Kansas movie, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean that's it, right? So I feel like I mean the rest of the world doesn't really experience tornadoes like the United States, and I think Twister definitely has it's kind of like a um I don't know. I feel like it's kind of that one movie that like I guess I could think of Jaws. Like that's kind of the one shark movie that kind of stands out. I mean, there aren't really many other ones that I guess besides Shark Tale. um, there aren't many other shark movies that really stand out. I mean, tornado movies, I can't name any besides Twister, so I feel like Twister kind of made it, and then there really wasn't anything else that they could do with that type of movie. But yeah, it's definitely an iconic movie.
I'm a little upset that you'd mentioned both sharks and tornado movies without talking about Sharknado, because it's kind of the best of both worlds. But
Yeah, that's a good point. It's the crossover I that slipped my mind.
um, but yeah, I think Netflix's top 10 is pretty solid, especially since they're having to compete with HBO Max now. This is a solid lineup.
Yeah, HBO Max. Do you have it?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I've heard great things. I mean, I see photos of the library and it looks great. I know it's not. I don't think it's available outside of the United States at this moment, but I mean, it looks like something worth having.
yeah, it's got, especially if you're talking about older movies, it's got a really stacked catalog with all of its Criterion films as well as its partnership with Turner Classic Movies. So it's definitely got a really strong catalog to open with. And they're going to have a lot more of a lot more blockbusters and things like that, which they're getting the Snyder cut too, so uh, they're pretty unchallenged at this point.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But other than that, this was also my first theater visit in right at 3 months this past week, um, which was exciting. I went to a little like mom and pop theater and saw a rerun of the Goonies, which I think this was the first time I'd seen the Goonies in about 10 years. And so this was only the second time I'd ever seen the movie. And it was just as kind of wondrous and fun as I remembered it being and wanted it to be again. So 10 out of 10 would recommend the Goonies.
Yeah, no, that I mean, even just movie aside, I mean, it's great to see a classic when you return. We've been talking about how that's kind of a great way to probably return to theaters. But I mean, how was it just kind of walking in there, sitting down, seeing the lights dim, and just watching the movie?
It felt wrong almost. I've just been like watching movies at home for so long, but just like walking in to the lobby, and it was a little small theater I'd never been in before. But just like walking into the lobby and just like that smell of popcorn hits you and you just like look down the hall and you see all the auditoriums. It was just such a good feeling. And then just to sit down and relax and watch a movie on the big screen. Even if it wasn't a movie that I probably would have defaulted to if I got to pick, it was something that I was like, well, yeah, of course I'm going to go see that one. And so, even though I don't have a particular fondness for the Goonies, growing up, I only saw it once before. It was just such a good time watching it and getting to kind of relive that for the first time almost.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I really want to get back to the theaters. I know that obviously I spoke about earlier in the show. Drive-in theaters are now opening up around here, and I definitely am gonna check one out at some point. Just the weather, I mean, it's definitely a little warmer where you are, most likely being a lot more south in comparison to where I'm at, but the night still gets a little bit chilly. So it'll be fun though. I'm looking forward to getting out to a drive-in because I don't even know if I've ever been to one in my life. I'm not too sure. Maybe when I was really young, but this would be the first time I really can remember and take in the experience. So that'd be quite fun. And I think it's probably the perfect time to do it as well.
Yeah, I'm not too big a fan of the drive-in just because like normally if I go to the drive-in, right, I'm not going to go specifically to watch the movie. I'm going to go to hang out with friends for the most part. And then, you got speakers and just people in their cars walking around. So I don't think it's the best way to experience a movie, but it's definitely a fun experience overall and just a fun thing to go do.
Yeah, and I mean I like that they do that most of them do the double feature as well. I think that's pretty fun because you might have one movie you want to go watch, and then the other one you kind of leisurely pay attention to. But no, I mean I think I just do want to go for that drive-in experience, and obviously capitalizing on just this whole scenario, and especially helping out these businesses because they definitely need it in this time.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a good thing to go support with everything going on and that has been going on for the past few months.
Definitely, but I mean, you're lucky. You're lucky. I'm dying to go back to the theater. I don't think there's a single actual indoor movie theater open in this country yet. But I'm hoping that happens by the time Tenet can hit theaters. I mean, you're a lucky guy.
Yeah, I'm very happy. We'll do it again. Especially if it takes a while for the big theaters and new stuff to open up. I'm happy to go to a little mom and pop theater and go support them and just enjoy doing something I love doing.
Oh yeah, definitely. And also just want to add another tidbit for you. This is good. So I checked out the Netflix top 10 here in Canada, and I know you're a huge, sarcastically, a huge Fast and Furious fan.
Oh yeah.
And half of the Netflix top 10 in Canada is Fast and Furious movies, and the entire franchise was just dumped onto Netflix Canada last week.
But which 5 are the top 5 or in the top 10 though? That's a real question.
Well, we got Fast 5. We got Fast the Fast and the Furious. We got Fast and Furious 7. We got Hobbs and Shaw. So I guess you can definitely count that as kind of one of the spin-offs, and then Too Fast and Too Furious. I think
Interesting.
That's 5. Just kind of a random.
That's the only one that surprises me is Too Fast, Too Furious, because in my experience, everybody seems to not like that one.
Yeah, it's sitting in at number 10, so maybe it's out of pure curiosity, but
maybe it's just like people have started the marathon and only hit 2, so they're like, well, I've already watched this one, so.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting though. I mean it's great to look at that top 10 and you just feel that pure cinema.
But yeah, that's this week on the MovieBabble Podcast. Make sure to check back because next week we'll be talking about more top 10. Hopefully Uncut will still be in the Netflix top 10 and just a little more theater news and just our watching experiences. And remember, you can always check us out online at moviebabble.com, and we'll talk at you next week.